I bring you greetings, Maplewood family, in the name of Jesus Christ. As you know, we have been, my name is Rick Page, and as you know, we have been talking about ReFocus for about the last 18 months to 2 years. This morning, we're going to dive into a little bit about what this ReFocus process is in a little more detail to give you a feel for what has transpired over the last few months, because we're getting ready to jump off with our ReFocus jump start. First, let me begin by saying just a couple things about an overview of the ReFocus process. First, ReFocus is a process. It is not a program. But next, it is a process that leads us to find where we are in our unique role God has given us as a church. It also helps us develop the vision and mission that God has given us within that body of Christ. Now, ReFocus is a process that helps a church develop a unique battle plan. Not only talk about mission and vision, but a battle plan to carry out that mission and vision. ReFocus is not, let me say a few things about what ReFocus is not. ReFocus is not a program to the path of a megachurch, if you will. I know some folks have been kind of trepidatious about that issue. It was developed by Dr. Rob Peters, former pastor of Calvary Baptist Church in Winston. But what's unique about the ReFocus process, it is a special program process, if you will, that is tailored to each church to help them find out what their unique appointed mission, vision, and battle plan is to fulfill that mission and vision. So what we're going to begin now is we're going to start in step one, if you will. It's a multi-step process, keyword process. This morning we're going to talk about two elements of that process, the discovery phase or process and the convergent phase or process. So first, let's look at what this discovery process is. It is primarily a fact-based, not a feeling-based means to discover where we are as a church. The reality is, if I were to ask many members of the church where we are as a church at Maplewood Baptist Church, we'd get a multitude of answers. And the most important thing is for us to have the same picture, if you will, of where we are as a church so that we can move forward. It helps us to discover where we are as a church. Some of you older folks may recall Dragnet, the Joe Friday of Dragnet. It's just the facts, if you will, in the discovery process. No fluff, no fiction or fantasy, but mere facts. So in the discovery process, we discovered what kind of church we are or where we are as a church currently. Are we a growing church? Are we a plateaued church? Are we a declining church? Or are we a dying church? Now, to discern the discovery process, there were 5 key tools that we used to help us provide a snapshot within the portfolio of where we are as a church. Now, it's important to note, these tools are not based on where we want to be, but where we are currently at in terms of our status of Maplewood Baptist Church. Again, are we a growing church, a plateaued church, a declining church, or a dying church? So how did we begin this process? Well, the first tool we're going to look at is the ReFocus Questionnaire. It was a scored exercise on 10 functional areas. And you can see those functional areas, those 10 functional areas, up on the screen. First impressions, worship, evangelism, discipleship, service, fellowship, prayer, stewardship, leadership, and organization. Now, what's important to note about that is each member of the ReFocus team did their own assessment to figure out where they thought we were as a church. And then we came together as a group and had a lot of intense discussion. It was very frank. It was very heated at times. But what is really neat is throughout this discovery process, beginning here with the ReFocus Questionnaire, we bathed everything in prayer. Brother Jimmy had us do a prayer book on prayer as we began to move forward in this process. But what is really exciting, quite frankly, is that we were totally unified. At the end of this process, at the ReFocus Questionnaire process, step one, we were completely unified so that what we saw as a group was one picture, not many different pictures. So that's very, very important. And so what did we discover? What did we discover, if you will, about these 10 functional areas? Well, what we did is we identified the 3 lowest areas and the 3 highest functional areas. Now, some of these may be a surprise and some of them may not be. But it's really what is important I want you to see in terms of the lowest. Let's start there first. Is there was overwhelming consensus, if you will, that the fact that we have a discipleship issue and an evangelism issue. And this will drive a lot of our issues as a church as we move forward with the ReFocus process. We also noticed discipleship and evangelism were low, as well as service. Now, on the good news side, the 3 highest is we are a fellowship church. This church really, really embraces the fellowship of its members. It is a very strong aspect of Maplewood Baptist Church. Again, worship. Worship is a strength of this church, and it's getting stronger with Danny's presence here as he has arrived as a new staff member. So fellowship and worship, and then giving. What I find amazing is Maplewood Baptist Church is the most giving church I've ever been part of, and that's a good thing. So those are our lowest and highest functional areas of the beginning with step 1. Now, step 2 of the ReFocus process is the numeric assessment based on the 5-year history of the following indicators. So what we did here is each one of these areas, if you will, these numeric assessment areas, is based on where we are, again, where we are on as a church, and it's based on facts, the statistics within a 5-year period, the 5 previous years of life at Maplewood Baptist Church. Total membership, worship attendance, Bible Fellowship for Life attendance, the number of baptisms, and new members within the life of the church. So we need to ask ourselves, what did we discover about these numbers? And what do these numbers indicate? We'll have more to say about what they specifically indicate a little bit later. But first, look at the worship attendance and Sunday school attendance. And here's, just take just a brief moment and look at that graph, if you will. And the question is, what does that graph tell you? I'm going to let you discern that for yourself, and I'll bring it all to fruition at the end of the 5 indicators, if you will. But be thinking about what it shows and tells about our worship attendance and Sunday school attendance at Maplewood Baptist Church. The next graph is the total members that we have here, the total membership within the life of the church, and the number of new members that we have had within the last 5 years. And I'll just make an observation to maybe tickle your toenails, and that is, doesn't that look a little flat? Doesn't that look a little flat? Now, the next graph that we want to look at is simply this, is the number of baptisms. And this is a very stark graph. As you can see, for the last 3 years, we've been on either a plateau or a slightly declining path of baptisms. Again, let me ask you, what does that say? What does that graph represent? What does it indicate? Not my opinion, not Pastor Jimmy's opinion or the ReFocus team's opinion, but what does it indicate by the facts and not the feelings? Now, the third exercise that we did was the ebb and flow exercise. What do we mean by the ebb and flow exercise? Simply, we looked at the church's history, and we painted the church's history based upon the church's self-designed biography or autobiography of life of the church, which many of you all have, as well as the history that the cross-section of the members of the team have. We had folks that had been here as founding members, other long-term members, and newer members like myself. And we ask ourselves, what were the ebb and flow experiences, the most challenging and the most positive experiences within the life of the church? And then we ask, what does that indicate? What can we glean from that? So let's look at the most positive church experiences that we came up with as the ReFocus team. First, we noticed that starting and building of the church was an extremely positive experience of the life of the church. There was an enormous amount of energy. There was enormous enthusiasm. And there was enormous togetherness and teamwork and focus, if you will. And what we've noticed is, we will talk more later, is that it's kind of waned a little bit. And what we want to try to do is bring back some of that intense energy and focus with this ReFocus process. Next is sense of family. This is a very family-oriented church. Folks are are led to feel as if they are actual members within the body of Christ. And that is a very positive experience. The growth of our youth program has been a historic strength and positive aspect of our church, and is getting stronger with the addition of Curtis as an intern. Project RAC, the inception and the ongoing activity of Project RAC was an extremely positive experience. Renovation of the barn, and then the Bible Fellowship for Life team or programs within the life of the church. So let's look at some of the most challenging experiences within the life of the church. Now, this is not meant to be personal, but it's a group observation. And the first one we want to look at is the lack of spiritual growth among church members. The lack of spiritual growth among church members. You see, Jesus takes us from where we are and moves us to become more like Christ. And the issue that concerned us was, as a challenge, is just the lack of spiritual growth among the church members. We felt as a group, folks just wanted to be static and stay where they are, comfortable, if you will. Christ doesn't really care about our comfort. He cares about us understanding the kingdom and how to grow the kingdom. Loss of staff members was a challenge. There was a period in the life of the church where we had an excessive turnover of church staff, and that was very disruptive and challenging in the life of the church. Church members attending on a regular basis. We have a lot of folks that's hit or miss. And without active members attending on a regular basis, it is hard for the church to do what God has asked it to do. Lack of member participation is part of that too. Attracting new people, teachers for children. In reality, we have some of the same teachers that are teaching our children that were founding members or older members. Retention of people. There's a revolving door, if you will, of people coming and going in the life of the church. We need to have a means, if you will, of retention, perhaps a new member program or some of those things we'll talk about later. An unwillingness to try something new or change. Now let's be real. None of us like change for change's sake, but life is full of changes. We all are in different seasons, and life continually moves. If we firmly believe that the life of the church is a body, or the church is a body, then there is going to be some changes within the life of that body. It is part of the life cycle. And no one likes change, but it is inevitable. So we sensed a challenge of this unwillingness to try something new or to change. Now, what did we do with this information of the ebb and flow? What we did is we discerned patterns in each of those categories. What were the common patterns within of the positive and challenging experiences within the life of the church? We discerned the patterns. Then we discovered the root causes, the motivations, and the reasons for some of those issues behind each of those experiences. Again, we did all this with intense prayer and frank and intense discussion. There was a lot of heated discussion at times, but what was really, again, what was a positive thing for us as a group was the building of consensus through this process and coming to the same perspective and same vision or snapshot along the way. The fourth tool that we used was the narrative discovery. And you may ask, what do we mean by narrative discovery? It is putting our story as a church, Maplewood Baptist Church, to words. We had to write a 500-word essay, if you will, about the life of the church. How do we derive our name? There is a significant history about how Maplewood Baptist Church derived its name. It's a good news story. What is behind our history? How did Maplewood Baptist Church start? The truth of the matter is, it started in sort of conflict, if you will, or a parting of the ways from a previous church. It was birthed, if you will, from another church. So how did the church arrive at this location? There's a unique story about how we arrived here at this place. Who has God used? Pastors in the life of the church, lay leaders within the life of the church to make a significant impact within the church body. So again, how did we derive our name? What is behind our story? How did the church arrive at this location? Who has God used in the life of the church, pastors and lay leaders, to impact the life of this church? Again, when we put all that together, it painted a picture. And perhaps one of the things I'd like to share with you about that narrative story is simply this. One of the things that we noticed about Maplewood is this is an intensely close church. It's a very prayerful church. It was birthed in prayer. And that is a significant strength of our church. It was birthed in prayer. Number 5, the deeper discoveries. What do we mean by the deeper discoveries within the church? Well, specifically, each member of the ReFocus team was given a series of questions and sent out to, if you will, survey number of church members, up to 10 church members. And here's what the questions we used were simply this. Maplewood Baptist Church exists to. What was that question? What was the answer to that question? Maplewood Baptist Church exists to. Here are just simply a few of the answers that we received from the congregation. Maplewood Baptist Church exists to reach people. Maplewood Baptist Church exists to minister to the members and the community. Maplewood Baptist Church exists to spread the gospel. The second question we looked at is, Maplewood Baptist Church is best at, and fill in the blank. Maplewood Baptist Church, let's just look at 2 of those items. Maplewood Baptist Church is best at making you feel welcomed. Maplewood Baptist Church is best at reacting to and meeting people's needs. We see that in the RAC ministry and the way we minister to one another. Maplewood Baptist Church would be better if it only, and fill in the blank. Maplewood Baptist Church would be better if it only were more diverse within its age and ethnicity. Look around within the life of the church, and we see a lot of folks that look like us. A lack of diversity and age and ethnicity. The truth is, we are an aging church. Secondly, Maplewood Baptist Church would be better if it only members would be more active. We would be a better church if we had more members taking part in the life and activities and ministries within the church, if we became more active. Again, we must ask ourselves, why? Third, Maplewood Baptist Church would be better if it only looked more to the future and not to the past. Now, let me offer just a caveat with that. You see, we have to know our past to know how to move forward. But the real issue is dwelling in the past and staying there, being comfortable with the past, and not being aware of where we need to go in the future. Has a lot of ramifications about discipleship, passing the baton to newer generations. Maplewood Baptist Church would be better off or better if it only looked more to the future and not to the past. Again, using the past as a springboard to jump to greater things in the future. It would be, if it would be willing to change. Maplewood Baptist Church would be better if it only would be more willing to change. That is an overall theme that we saw in this discovery process. So the question is now, what did we do with all these indicators? What did we do with all these 5 measures or indicators within the discovery process? Well, here's what we did. We used the survey questionnaire, the numeric exercise, the ebb and flow exercise, church narrative, and the deeper discoveries. You know, it's kind of like making liver mush. When I was a kid growing up, my grandmother, I love liver mush. But my grandmother took me down to Waldensian's meat market one day, and she gave me a class, or showed me a class, on how they make liver mush. It is an ugly process. But boy, that liver mush sure tastes good at the end of that process. Again, process is the key word. So we made some liver mush, if you will. And in that process, we took all that we had gleaned from that discovery process, the surveys, the numeric exercises, the ebb and flow, and the church narrative, and the deeper discoveries, and we just put it all together. And we mixed it up. We had some very frank discussions, some teary-eyed discussions, and we had some epiphanies and discoveries, which we will just share with you at a later time from individual members of the team. But we came about and we looked at those indicators, and we looked at all that discussion and the take and give, and we came up with 5 big discoveries that will drive us or drove us to discern and to give us a benchmark of where we really are. Again, where we really are. Not where we aspire to be, but where we are currently. Again, no fluff, no fantasy, no feelings. Just the facts. And here are the 5 main discoveries that we came up with. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on each one because it is extremely important that we understand these discoveries as a church. The first is trust. Trust. Now, this is going to rankle a few feathers, but let me explain. Trust. We felt that there needs to develop a trust so that the church can function effectively and pursue its God-given mission. There seems to be an underlying, if you will, lack of trust among members within the life of the church. And that translates into trusting the various leaders within the life of the church. Now, let me make an observation, okay, to put this in context. If you looked at the numeric graphs, you will find that Maplewood is a plateaued church, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But what I want to emphasize here is, as the church began, as the church was birthed, it had to develop the various ministries, policies, and things within the life of the church. And it became wedded to some of those policies and procedures. And as the church began to grow, the core members or some of the established rules and things there needed to change. Again, tied to a fear of change. And so as the church moved forward and the leaders began to push out, there was a hesitation. And that hesitation was a fear of change. And it showed itself in the face of a lack of trust. a lack of trust. And if we're going to be a church that's going to be on mission for Jesus, we've got to have trust among the leaders, from Jimmy to the Bible fellowship leaders, to the deacons, and to the other committee chiefs and chairs. We need not centralize things as we did in the beginning when the church was first birthed. So that's where we come with this observation of trust, or to develop a closer trust among all of us. The second one is leadership, and this gets into the issue of trust. Also, why did we have a lack of trust? Because we need to develop, or we didn't have, if you will, a comprehensive church-wide approach to identify and developing new leaders. Some of the faces that we see in the life of the church are the same as when the church was birthed. There was and is a lack of a comprehensive church-wide approach to identifying and developing new leaders. Now, what we'll find out is the ReFocus process works in 7-year increments. Studies have shown that a church needs to refocus itself every 7 years if it's going to stay on mission. And within that 7-year cycles, we develop leaders to be able to carry on to the next cycle. And the question is, have we done that? Have we done that? The ReFocus team feels like we've fallen a little short. Vision. We discovered that we need a vision. If I were to ask, or Pastor Jimmy or anyone on the ReFocus team were to ask, what is the vision of Maplewood Baptist Church, we would get innumerable answers. And so what we discovered is we need to reignite our spiritual passion by committing the church to a common vision that inspires individual members. Because the reality is, if I have a vision of the church, I'm going to operate this way. If you have a vision of the church, you're going to go that way. And someone else is going to go this way. And so there's no unity or cohesive vision. So one of our jobs, of our tasks that we were tasked by the church, is to develop a common vision so we all see what God is revealing to us. Number 4 is facilities. We need to plan for and create space to accommodate growth. Now, some of those areas where we need to plan for and look at is a first impressions area, if you will. Now, we have a great first impressions in the narthex, but what happens outside of those doors? What is the first impression when someone drives up to our parking lot? Women's restrooms. You ladies know that we have a chronic shortage of ladies' restrooms. Parking will become an issue as we grow and go with Jesus. Look at the worship and classroom space. As we grow as a church, and even now we have an issue, if you will, for classroom space. Plan. We need to create a comprehensive plan for moving people far from God to a place where they have a passion for God. Again, this gets into discipleship. New members ministry, if you will, so that we bring folks to come to know Christ and the expectations and the way we operate as a church body. All of that were the discoveries that we made. Now, from these discoveries, from an issue with trust, lack of a comprehensive leadership plan among the leaders within the church, or junior leaders within the church and the members, the lack of vision and the facilities and a plan for comprehensive moving people forward in discipleship, all this leads us to make a discernment, if you will, of where we feel we are in the life cycle of the church. And this leads us to the next picture. The question is, are we a growing church, a plateaued church, or a declining church? Now here's the facts. When you look at all the tools we use for the discovery process, what we unanimously felt as a group, we came together. There were some people that had us on different place of the graph, but at the end of the dialogue and discussion and prayer, we feel that Maplewood is a plateaued to a declining church. A plateaued to a declining church. We are not a dying church, but we certainly are a declining church. And some of the key questions we need to ask ourselves were the questions we asked our group as the ReFocus team. Why? Why are we a plateaued and declining church? What are the reasons for that? What caused this plateau declining to become acceptable behavior? Well, let me just pause here for a moment and make an observation. Now, some folks can say, well, Rick, we could have done this all along. We didn't need to have this refocus process to tell us that we are a declining church. Well, the response from the group would simply be this. If we knew this, why didn't we take action? That's why we needed the refocus process. To look at ourselves from the outside, if you will. So here is why we discerned that Maplewood Baptist Church is a plateaued to declining church. First, the numerical indicators. The numerical indicators. The number of worshipers at worship. The number of folks attending Bible fellowship. Now I have some good news. Since we have instituted that with the ReFocus process, we have had an increase in our Bible fellowship for life. But the majority of the indicators are downward. A lack of receptivity to change, as we've noted already. A lack of discipleship and evangelism. A lack of discipleship and evangelism. Jesus didn't call us to make believers. He called us to disciple believers. Discipleship and evangelism are linked together, and we need to have a cohesive plan. No unified mission or vision. Again, if we ask many different people within the life of the church, we get many different answers. Member expectations are not clearly defined. My expectations of a church member differ from your expectations, and your expectations differ from someone else. We need to have a clearly defined, if you will, expectations for church members. Being wedded to a programmatic church orientation versus a process-oriented church. But most significantly, number 7, we've lost our love for Jesus and the lost. We have lost our first love for Christ and those He loved, the lost. Now, let's move on to the convergence process, and this will speed up just a little bit. But what is the convergence process? Well, the convergence process is the sweet spot, if you will. And the goal of the convergence is to find out where we are in terms of the mission and ministry God has given us, where certain things converge. The goal of convergence is to discover the place where the community, the church, and the leadership all come together or converge. The goal is to discover where the church ministry can be uniquely positioned. By examining the outside, if you will, the outside of the church, the community, we can gather the needs within the community. And then we look at the church, what we feel God is calling us to do. Then we look at Brother Jimmy's passion for what God has positioned him for here in the life of our church. And we look at all three of those, and it should converge to several different things, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And where those things converge is where we need to place our ministry and focus. Now, this will help, and when we do the convergence process, what this will help us is to differentiate our church from all the different churches in our community. The church is a body. Individually is each church. And then the church is a bigger body within a collection of churches. And each of those churches has a unique mission and calling. We do not have the same calling as Northwood. We do not have the same calling as Collide. We do not have the same calling, if you will, of all the other churches. We share one common, and that is the Great Commission. And how we carry that out depends upon the convergence process. Now, this will help us differentiate, but it will also lead us to use the tools and opportunities God has given us as a church. In other words, when we know where God has uniquely positioned our church, we won't spend, if you will, or expend energy and resources on things that do not emphasize that convergence or that mission God has given us based on the positioning of where He wants us within the body. So, from the convergence, we discerned and discovered several things. We discovered and discerned the church's purpose. The church's purpose. The leader's passion. The community's potential and needs. So, the result then of the convergence is this one big idea. This one big idea between the leader's passion, the mission of the church, and the community. So, what does that look like? Well, we had to make some key observations and ask key questions about our needs and passions and capabilities within each of certain areas, within the community, within the church, and within the life of our leadership. And here's what we found. Within the community, we found there is a lot of brokenness to the underserved. The broken in our community are underserved. There's significant child hunger. There's significant drug and alcohol issues. We have a growing Hispanic population. We have a large population of single parents. And we have a community that is very family focused. So again, what do those say? What do those say? And how do we operate from those things? And so next we looked at the church. We know worship is a strength. We know we're a very generous and supporting church of local missions. We need to serve others with intentionality. We do a lot of things, but we do them spuriously and not with intentionality. We need to plan to reach the lost with a plan of evangelism. We need a deliberate discipleship and spiritual formation plan. That's contributed to our lack of leadership in the church. And we need to embrace brokenness. The truth of the matter is we're all broken, and great brokenness is out there and outside the life of the church as well as inside the church. We need to develop leader depth. Leader depth. Now, looking at the leadership, one of Jimmy's passions is for us to grow spiritually, to have a lifestyle of caring concern for those who are in need, a clear vision and mission, teaching and preaching, an outward community focus. Because you see, the church is not about us. It's about Jesus and what He would have us to do. And with that, a passion to share Christ. So what we did is we looked at the community potential, the leader passion, and the church's purpose. And where the dark triangle is where all these converged. And here's how we came up with that convergence. As we talked, as we dialogued, as we prayed, as we made observations, we looked at key words and concepts that kept bubbling up from these three areas. Each of them had its own unique words and concepts. And we came up with a list. Now, I'm not going to read them, but take just a moment, if you will, to look at those. And through that list, there's a common thread. Community, relationships, service, outreach, family, evangelism, spiritual gifts, and brokenness. All those were common elements running through each of those areas. Again, So how did we take all of that, all those words and concepts, and come up with one big idea? Because you remember the convergence process is coming up with that one big idea. Well, again, we took the key words, ideas, and concepts, and put them in a funnel, if you will. We prayed and used key Bible verses that were linked to each one of those concepts. And here you see just a few of those Bible verses. We took all of that, and then we made liver mush round 2. We had some intense discussions. We prayed a lot. We talked a lot. And so here is what we came up with. The one big idea for Maplewood Baptist Church is brokenness and bridges. Brokenness and bridges. And so the next step within the refocus process will be taking those key concepts and ideas of brokenness and bridges and asserting them to a vision and a mission to meet those needs associated with brokenness and bridges. I hope this clarifies a lot of questions. Let me just say it's been a real privilege serving on this ministry team. And if you have questions, please pick up the phone and call me or one of the members of the Refocus team or someone or us with the answers. And we will be glad to talk with you in depth more about this process. Thank you for your time. God bless you and be safe. And to God be the glory. Amen.